All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I hope you had a good weekend, a good Lord's Day, a good everything. Welcome back. We're going to get started. Actually, this week, this is the beginning and the end of the week for videos. I've got a secret mission that I'm leaving for tomorrow, and I'll probably do some shorts and stuff like that, but this will be the full video for the week. And I cannot wait for you guys to see the results of the mission. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to everybody seeing it. But in any case, I did want to just quickly address some of the drama. I don't really do a lot of drama on this channel. Every now and then I'll get into it, but some of the drama with Dr. James White and Dr. Stephen Wolfe. You know, I love both of them. I think they're both good people, and I like what both have to say a lot of the time. There definitely seems, from a third party's perspective, there definitely seems to be some personal feelings flying around that whole controversy, but I wanted to offer my take just from a peacemaker's perspective, you know, because A.D. Robles is here to help. I know you guys get it, you know, so I'm going to try to help if I can. But let's just jump into it. I had to pop 3 Zins in order to get through this, so we're ready to go. So this is a meme. This is kind of a bit of a troll that Steven typically does that I think is, I think it actually is a meaningful troll, but Dr. James White did not appreciate it. Here's Josh Bice, who I don't know him at all, so I have no feelings one way or the other. You got Owen Strawn here, who I do know a little bit, and I definitely have feelings about. Anyway, here's the picture. They've got a picture, and they're at Samuel Rutherford's tomb. And Josh says, I had the privilege to visit the cathedral ruins at St. Andrews with our G3 Ministries tour group. I snapped this picture next to Sam Rutherford's grave with my friend Owen Strawn. And then he puts a quote of Samuel Rutherford that I guess he approves of. And he says, hashtag church history matters. And here's the picture of the two friends standing by Rutherford's tomb and all of that. And Stephen said, you both would excommunicate Rutherford. Because Stephen, you know, he draws a lot from Rutherford and his work and his things like that. And it's the stuff that Josh Bice would strongly stand against in the strongest terms. Here I stand, I can do no other. That's not Josh, that's Owen. But they're like honoring the prophet. People ought to say they're honoring the prophets, but if they were here today, you would stone them. That comes straight from the Bible. Jesus says that to the Pharisees. You know, you honor the prophets with your mouth, but if they were here today, you'd have them up on a cross, basically, is what he said. And so, you know, Stephen has been saying this quite a bit. You both would excommunicate Rutherford. You both would excommunicate Calvin. You'd excommunicate Luther. All these guys that you guys revere, a lot of Stephen's ideas, in fact, pretty much all of them, come from that tradition. And so, you know, we're taking the reformers seriously, and not just in the areas related to, you know, the gospel, but also in areas related to civil governing authority and things like that. And because of that, you're basically casting us into outer darkness. That's what he's saying. He's basically, you know, kind of trying to use the same thing that Jesus said about the prophets about these guys. You know, they'll honor his tomb, but when I start talking about civil governing authority from Rutherford, you think I'm a heretic. So, oh, hold on, I gotta find it. Here we go. So Dr. James White kind of responds to this, and he says this. He says, sigh. Long morning so far. My response to another Wolfism is, yeah, so? So he's affirming, yeah, he would excommunicate Samuel Rutherford if he had the opportunity. He says, in 2017, I got to lead a wonderful group of folks on a Reformation tour in Germany, literally a few weeks before the 500th anniversary. Here's one of my favorite pictures. You've seen it before, where I'm preaching from the pulpit at Castle Church in Wittenberg. Luther is buried directly below me. The sermon is on YouTube. Every single person on that trip will tell you the same thing. I never caricatured the reformers, though I do know that happens all the time. I told the truth about the Reformation, all of it, even to the point of causing discomfort for some in the group. I started out the first night in Berlin pointing out that many of the men we would be discussing would never have extended to us the right hand of fellowship, and yet we discussed them, honored them, and were thankful for their lives and ministries. This is what a mature study of church history requires: honesty, grace, and context. Disagree with the great servant of the past? Well, you can Dave Hunt them and kick them out of the kingdom, or You can recognize the context in which they lived, consider their theological perspectives, the knowledge they did or did not have, and make a judgment at that point. But as I have always said, remember that you someday may be judged by those who come after you. Will you need grace then? Will you wish those future people would honestly place you in our context and not judge you by the standards you don't know? So we can visit such places and thank God for men who came before us, even while honestly admitting our differences. We are simply children if we can't do this. And I want to say this with respect because, Dr. James White has forgotten more about church history than I've ever known. It's as simple as that. And so I cannot challenge him on any aspect of history proper. And also, Dr. James White is a very logical thinker in almost every area, and he's a very careful thinker, and he's a very, in my opinion, good thinker. I appreciate, so much of what I've learned from Dr. James White. In fact, I remember when I was recently converted, I bought his book on Islam because I had so many friends that were Muslim at the time, and Muslims are great because they're willing to talk about spiritual things. They're open about it. They want to talk about it. They want to talk about Jesus. Of course, they want to do it from a Muslim perspective, but I wanted to understand kind of what Islam was all about and things like that. And of course, I talked to my friends about it, but some of them were like, part-timers, that's what they call it, part-time Muslims, things like that. So I wanted to know kind of what the documents, it was a very helpful book. In fact, he sent it, and it was even a signed copy of that book, which was great. So I appreciate Dr. James White's thoughts, and I've learned so much from Dr. James White. There's just no question about it. But I got to be honest, I don't understand how this, I think maybe this is the personal aspect of the fight between him and Dr. Stephen Wolfe. Maybe this is kind of rearing its ugly head. I don't see how this addresses the point at all, because when I look at Stephen saying you would excommunicate Samuel Rutherford, what I see Stephen doing, and he's trolling. I mean, there's no question about it. That's a bit of a troll. It's a bit of a meme, right? But behind the troll, there's an important point there. What I see Stephen saying is not, I know you're wrong because you would excommunicate Samuel Rutherford. What I see him saying is he's asking for a little bit of grace for himself and for his friends. It's not that he's saying, you guys are idiots or anything like that. He's just pointing out that this man that you guys honor, and rightfully so, he's not against you honoring him despite your differences. But the fact that you would honor him in this way, that you would seek to take a picture at his grave, and as if and keep it as like a trophy, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's fine. You can do that. It's not a kind of a picture that I would take, but that's okay. No one has to do things the way I do it. But you would do this to this man that had the same ideas that I'm putting forward today and wanting to bring into our modern context, and you have no grace for me. Why is it that you have grace for Samuel Rutherford? You should. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But he's asking. He's pleading, I think, for just a little bit of grace for me. I'm not this monster. I'm not this evil, secret guy that's bringing these new ideas that have never been thought of before. That are just it's an innovation to the faith. It's like I'm not doing that. I'm going back to the very guys that you all honor and revere and love, and of course you differ from them, but you do it from a place of grace. You do it from a place of respect. You do it from a brotherly affection for these guys. It's kind of like your grandparents, right? Was every now and then your grandparents will say something that you think is totally off, and on the inside you're face palming like, I've done this before, and sometimes I've done it inappropriately, and there's no question about that. It can be done inappropriately, but you do it like this on the inside, but on the outside you're like, man, Samuel Rutherford was just a beast. That guy was awesome. You know what I mean? A beast in a good way. I don't mean, monster. That guy was awesome. He brought so much value to the church. He was such a blessing. His ministry was such a blessing. And we can talk about some of his warts, but man, he was a blessing. Why can you do that with the dead prophets of the past? But today, when people take their words and they're saying, those were good ideas, even the stuff that, we haven't really talked about so much, in our churches, even that had some value. And let's talk about some of that stuff, because I think that applies to the situation we find ourselves in today. Why is there no grace for me? It's as if, it's not even that there's less grace. It's that there's none for me. It's that when I bring this stuff back from Rutherford and from others, and you hear it for the first time, you're like, oh, that's heresy. That's heresy. And I'm not talking disagreement. That excludes you from the cross of Christ. I don't even know if you know Christ if you're saying that. And Stephen lays these traps. And guys, if you're still fooled by these traps, you got to really reconsider how you engage on social media. You should not be fooled by these traps that Stephen lays all the time. He'll say something in his own words. He'll say something that is not acceptable to the regimes today. It's not acceptable to the typical evangelical today. He'll say it. And you'll get a wall of people saying, that's heresy, that's this, just calling him all kinds of things. And then a few minutes later, he drops the quotation, and it's from Calvin, and it's from Luther, it's from, Rutherford, it's from all of you, it's from Zwingli, whoever it is, right? And it's saying the same thing that Stephen just got done saying without quoting it. You said it was heresy, but it turns out that's actually something Rutherford taught. Stephen is not saying you need to agree with him. You know what I mean? He's not saying Rutherford said it, therefore it's true, and you have to agree with it. What he is saying, though, is that your modern mind has been so modernized that you cannot distinguish between an idea that maybe you disagree with, but that it excludes you from the church, and one that does not exclude you from the church, but maybe you disagree with it. He does this all the time. Why is grace only retroactive for so many of you, is what he's saying. That's what he's saying when he says you would excommunicate, whoever. I see it as a request, as a plea for just a little bit of grace. Just a little bit. It's not like Stephen Wolfe is over on an island somewhere and he's been excommunicated from his church and his church has kicked him out and he's refused to stop and he just continues to teach this errant doctrine even despite the fact that he's no longer a member of a church. It's not like that. He's a member of a church. His elders are in authority over him. They know what he writes. They know what he's like. They know his life. They know his family. And he's a member in good standing of a church. And not some woo-woo, wonky church that nobody knows about. I'm pretty sure it's an OPC church. And these every single time he says, you would excommunicate Rutherford. He's not saying you're stupid. He's saying, why can't you give me just a little bit of grace? And here, James White, he kind of says the same thing. He says, will you need grace? He says, as I've always said, remember that you someday may be judged by those who come after you. Will you need grace then? Yes! In fact, I need it now. In fact, I'd like it now. You can't demand grace, of course. He's not going to demand it, but he's just wondering out loud, why is there so much grace retroactively and so little grace today? Where there's people that say things that Luther would have said or Zwingli would have said or Calvin was, that doesn't make it right. He's not that stupid to think that just because somebody said something, a church father said something, that means it's automatically right. You don't have to agree with Stephen. This is my point. And this is what people wonder. Why do I defend Stephen? Especially when they know that there are things about Stephen's work that I might not agree with or that I'd have a problem with or I don't. Stephen, oftentimes rebukes theonomy. I'm a theonomist. I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? I'm okay with it. It's fine. Why is it that it was okay for Rutherford to the point where you'd even honor him today? And that's fine. Nobody's saying you shouldn't. But it excludes you from the grace of God today. Dr. White, he's not talking about the future. Yes, he would agree that he would want people to judge him from the future in his context. He would want them to have grace for him. He's not against grace for people with which you disagree. That's the point of what he's saying, James. Dr. White, with respect. So, quick editing note here. I'm editing right now. And at this point, it sounds like I'm saying that Dr. White doesn't understand this. But actually, if there's any person that understands this, it is Dr. White. And actually, Doug Wilson falls into this category too. Like I've seen Dr. White interact with and be brotherly with and work with people that he disagrees with very sharply. Doug Wilson does the same thing as well. It's very clear, though, that they understand that there are friends out there that are they're going to have wildly different beliefs on some areas, but you could still work with them. But the point, though, is that it certainly seems like the G3 camp, not all of them necessarily, but some of the louder ones, they don't understand this, and that's why I think that Stephen addressed this to them, and it's like, and I do think though that for whatever reason that a lot of people that maybe even do understand this to some degree, they don't extend the same thing to Stephen. They don't extend it to Stephen for whatever reason, and I think I have some ideas as to why, but I'd rather not go into that. So James understands this full well, I think, but it's not well understood in that general camp, the G3 camp. And every time Stephen lays this trap that he does, it's so clear that this is not well understood. And so that's the thing. It's like we have to have some kind of room for people to have different views about what a nation is and what it ought to be and all of these kinds of things without instantly jumping to the MSNBC rhetoric. And unfortunately, G3 has not done this, and they continue to not do this. And it doesn't have to be this way. That's what I've been saying from the beginning of this controversy. It does not have to be this way, especially on the issue of race. We are collectively terrible about thinking through issues of race with a level head. We are terrible at it. And so every time you feel those feelings, inside you, when somebody says something about race that doesn't sound quite right to you, you feel that emotion in you. My advice has always been, take a step back. Don't quickly respond. Don't quickly, rebuke. Think it through. Let the person explain themselves. Talk it out with them, things like that, before you go jumping on that bandwagon. Allow them the grace today that you would afford Rutherford of the past or Calvin of the past and things like that. That's all I'm saying here. So I just wanted to put that edit in there because it kind of sounded when I was talking that I was saying that James White doesn't know this, but actually he does know this. It's really more Owen and some of these other guys. That's all he's asking for with that. We can visit such places and thank God for the men who came before us, even while honestly admitting our differences. Can we not, Dr. White, thank God for men contemporary with us, even while honestly admitting our differences? You ask the question, or you state, we're simply children if we can't do this. Dr. White, I agree. We're simply children if we can't do this. If I turned my back on Stephen Wolfe's entire project because he has bad things to say about, Bonson or Rushdoony or Van Til, I would be a child. That's the point. He's asking for you to use a standard that makes sense. Give him a little bit of room. Again, I can understand, at least to some degree, if it was an innovation, if it was something new, if it was something that no one's ever said before. But that's not what Stephen Wolfe's project is. It's bringing stuff back from these men that were some of these men, Dr. White, you would agree, I think. They were geniuses. Calvin was a genius. And you want to, maybe we've missed something with some of what they said about the civil governing authority or natural law or whatever it is. Maybe we've missed some of that. Maybe we discarded it too quickly for more modern ideas regarding God's law. And again, I'm a theonomist, and I love Van Til and all this stuff. So, I get it. I get it. Can he have a little room? Can he have a little grace? For when he brings something back from these men that you would be proud. Look at them sticking their chests out. Proud to have been to the place where Samuel Rutherford was buried. When I bring some of that stuff back that maybe was, in my opinion, discarded a little too quickly, can I have a little room to work with that and to think through that without my brothers in Christ casting me into outer darkness with not even 1 ounce of grace for me? That's what he's saying, Dr. White. That's what he's trolling. I get it. And there's some personal stuff here. I get it. I'm not saying you'd have to like the guy. You know what I mean? I can like people that don't like each other. I saw Michael Foster post something like that the other day. It's so true. It's so true. But I wonder, I think you missed it here, Dr. White. I really do. I mean, good for you if you would excommunicate. Good for you if you would excommunicate Samuel Rutherford today. I mean, I guess if that's how you want to be, okay, that's your business. You're an elder. I'm not. My point, though, is that can we have a little grace today? Don't just put grace into the future where the people in the future should judge you, with grace. No, how about you judge your brothers today with just a little bit of grace? That's it. It's as simple as that. And so I hope that was helpful. I hope that was, I'm here to help. I hope it was reasonable. I hope it was, it was an attempt to have a little bit of peace here. I like fighting on Twitter, so I'm not going to be against fighting on Twitter. I'm all about it. But I just think that you're missing what his point is here. He's looking for a little grace. You show grace to the dead prophets. How about showing a little bit of grace today? I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.